jobs talk.
Okay, from this, we're going to go to Steve Ratner, who's going to be talking about the K-shaped economy, this period we're going through. So, Steve, you bring us the charts this morning on the health of the U.S. economy, and your first one shows how economic growth is uneven. Explain.
Yeah, Micah. So we've had economic growth now for a number of years, and it is continuing. But there are two things happening with economic growth that people should be aware of. The first is it's generally slowing. It's going from here to here down to just about under 2% in total. From 2.5% in 2024. But what's really interesting is we all talk about AI, and AI is now becoming a significant part of economic growth. AI, back in this whole period here, was only about 10% of economic growth. Now it's 31% of economic growth. And so the actual growth that's filtering down to ordinary Americans is dropping even by more, and it would be 1.1% in the first half of 2025. So that's happening on that side. And then what's happening in terms of wages for people, which partially reflects, obviously, that slowdown in economic growth, is that for the first time in a number of years, people toward the bottom are doing worse than people toward the top. You had a whole period going back to 2016 here, where wages for people at the bottom quartile rather, were rising faster than for the rest of the other quartiles further up. And then you had COVID, of course, but now it's gone the other way. And so people here in the bottom quartile are seeing their wages only going up by about 3.5% a year, while people up here are seeing them grow by more than 5.5% a year. And so we're seeing now rising income inequality for the first time in a number of years.
And your second chart, Steve, gets at why that is. A lot of it is to do with the explosion of the stock market in the last 5 or 6 years, with the wealthy getting much, much wealthier.
Yeah, we've had this extraordinary period in the stock market where you've had in 5 out of the last 6 years, you've had the stock market go up by 15% or more, as much as 30%, 25%. Obviously, huge increases, way above what the average American is going to get. And this year, while the year is not quite over yet, we're also on track for a year where the stock market is likely to go, it's not over, likely to go up by 15% a year again. So that's created an enormous amount of wealth. And that's helped. It's not the only thing. But that has helped fuel this purchasing power, huge rise in purchasing power on the part of the very wealthy. You can see if you go back to the beginning of 2020, the people in the top 20% have increased their consumption. They've bought more stuff by 50%. But every other income group has only gone up about 25, which is almost exactly the same of inflation. What does that mean? It means that for the average American, they're really not buying any more stuff than they were buying 4 years ago, which means their standard of living isn't really going up. This group here, actually not this group, the top 10% of Americans account for 50% of everything that's bought in this country today. So think about that. The top 10% of Americans get 50% of the consumption. The bottom 90% of Americans get the other 50% of consumption.
And your third chart is very jarring, especially if you're looking for a job right now. The job market looks rough.
Yeah, the job market is clearly getting rough, and that is unusual when you have an economy that's still expanding. But we have a number of things going on. We have tariffs going on. We have economic uncertainty going on. We have AI going on. And all those things together have led to a significant slowdown in the jobs market. We even had 1 month, this last month, where jobs may have declined. We don't have those official numbers yet because of the government shutdown, but ADP, the private forecaster, said we lost jobs last month. But let's look at two interesting things. So ADP, which is a big payroll processing company, as everybody I'm sure knows, for the last 4 months, virtually all the job creation has come from big companies, these red boxes here. The smaller companies, all the way down to the very smallest business, 1 to 19 employees, they've actually been losing jobs for 4 months. Some exceptions, obviously, but in total, losing jobs. So small business has really been hurting. The other thing that's interesting, and these are BLS numbers, Bureau of Labor Statistics numbers, is what kinds of jobs have we been creating? We've been creating jobs in leisure and hospitality, which means restaurants and hotels and things like that. We've been creating jobs in education and health. We obviously are a nation putting more and more into health. But everything else, we've basically been losing jobs. So whether it's finance or even information technology, notwithstanding AI, or the professions like law or business, we're losing jobs at the moment, and we're only creating jobs in these sectors. And so what does all that amount to? It amounts to the fact that more and more Americans are being unemployed for longer and longer. We define long-term unemployment as being unemployed for 27 weeks or more, and that percentage is now up to just over a quarter of all the unemployed are now considered long-term unemployed. Put aside COVID, that is the highest percentage since back here in 2016, and it is rising. And so you have more and more people in the long-term unemployed ranks. So it's not surprising when you look at these polls that you still find huge percentage of Americans who think the economy is getting worse, not better, who think that we're on the wrong track, not the right track. Because when you look at the average, ordinary, everyday Americans, they are simply not getting better off at the moment.
Putting your first and third charts together, the explosion of AI costing some of those jobs as well. So big picture, Steve, we were just talking briefly in the break about this idea of a bubble right now in the stock market. And the fears, as Andrew Ross Sorkin, our friend, is writing about in this new book, 1929, and has been talking about, but he's not alone in this, that there may be some kind of a crash coming. What's your sense of how big the bubble is and how painful the burst might be?
Stocks are very, very expensive. They're as expensive as they've almost ever been when you look at it relative to earnings and things like that. There's no question about that. A lot of what's been driving the stock market, as you know, has been what we call the Magnificent Seven, the big technology, mostly big technology companies that are involved in the AI boom. But other stocks are up as well. Look, predicting the stock market is honestly a fool's game. I don't try to do it. I don't think any good investor tries to do it. I personally would be very surprised if we had a crash along the lines of 1929. But it's certainly possible that the stock market will correct in here somewhere. It's had that extraordinary run that we talked about. Has had that extraordinary run that we talked about. And all good things do come to an end. So we could have a significant downturn in the stock market. I don't rule that out, but I'm not expecting 1929.
Morning Joe economic analyst Steve Ratner, thank you very much. As always, we appreciate you. All right.